The video is live.
Thank you. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Regional Services Committee meeting of May the 26th, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territories of the Salish peoples. And with that, I'll turn to our agenda today. First item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, moved, seconded, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M1 is the adoption of the Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of April 28th, 2021.
All right, any comments on those? No, the motion approved. Seconded, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No business arising from the minutes. No participants for public input period. So I am just going to move to delegations.
Thank you.
Bring our two of our guests in. Sarah Dent is the Executive Director, and Asia Jones-Martin as a Vancouver Island land matcher for the Young Agrarians. And they have a presentation regarding Young Agrarians BC land matching program for the Cowichan region, and it's for information.
Great, thank you very much, and welcome Ms. Dent and Ms. Martin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us here. It's wonderful to see everybody's faces, and thank you for your time today.
Great. Do you have a presentation, or you can carry on?
I do. I'll begin. Does that look okay to everybody?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so Young Agrarians, for anybody new to Young Agrarians, we're the largest educational resource network for new and young ecological farmers in Canada. We offer farmer-to-farmer programming to grow the next generation of farmers, and currently program delivery is focused on Western Canada. The network of farmers and collaborating organizations is national. And why do we do the work that we do? 9% of farmers in Canada are 35 and younger, and with only 1.7% of the Canadian population farming, there's a real need to invest in the next generation of farmers. The cost of land and production creates a significant sector entry barrier for new farmers. So our primary program goals are to support new farmers to access education, training, land, business mentorship, and sectoral resources. These are our 5 main program pillars that we started in 2012 with online engagement and educational farmer-to-farmer events. We've done quite a bit of work on Vancouver Island over the years. That led into a business mentorship program, which we've been delivering for the last 7 years, supporting new farms and startup to get support through a farm mentor. We have developed a whole suite of land access and transition resource supports. As well, we run an apprenticeship training program in the prairie provinces in regenerative agriculture. So each year, as our team grows, we're now 14 people working on Young Agrarians. We work with more and more people. We estimate last year we worked with 1,400 farmers representing 850 farms, 500 landowners, and 200 organizations. So the BC Land Matching Program, which is the request for support to the CVRD, is for 3 years of support for land matching in the region. This is a high-level impact graphic showing how many people we've been able to engage, 3,800 to date, how many people have come to network and meet and greet at our land links, over 2,500, how many listings we have on the UMAP, and how many acres that represents in available land for new farmers to access. How many people are registered in the BC LMP land matching program, which is now at 814. And to date, we've made 140 land matches on 27,000 acres across the province of British Columbia. So while, you know, matches are an interesting number, really the program is working to reach as many people as it can, provide educational support so that people interested in having their land put into agriculture, continue in agriculture, are able to connect into a wider network of resources and support and people in order to eventually lead to actual matches on the land. So since 2018, this is how many matches have been completed. On Vancouver Island, Asia, who's here with us today, has been doing a wonderful job over the last few years building out the program. And so these are the same numbers, but just for Vancouver Island. And for the CVRD to date, 16 matches have been made on over 44 acres. So I'll let people just have a moment there to read the slide. So all of these components go towards making this deliverable of the land matches and helping to support new and young people start farm businesses. These are a couple photos from some of our farmers in the Cowichan Valley that have made matches. And I think that, you know, hopefully there's a minute or two if there are any questions for Asia, people can ask them. This is another project that was recently completed. It's a BC transition toolkit for non-family farm transfer. Some of you may be aware that the statistics for succession plans for farms in Canada are very low. Not a lot of farms have succession plans. And a lot of people coming into farming today are not coming from family farm backgrounds. We estimate that about 2/3 are not coming from family farm backgrounds. So we wanted to create something for British Columbia that would help our land matching team develop their skill set and then help the public understand how to navigate transition. So this resource is available on our website. And this has helped our land matchers as well to start working on more comprehensive arrangements with farms. So the land matching is mostly lease agreements, and now our land matchers, which are a team across British Columbia, are also working on more extensive farmland transition projects. So this is our 2021 funding team. We hope that the CVRD will join us for the next few years of the program with support. And I wanted to make sure that there was a minute or two if there are any questions from councillors. We have Asia with us here today, and she is your local expert in land matching.
That's great. Thank you very much. So if you can take the screen down, we'll see if there's any questions.
Sorry, just trying to figure out how to exit the screen sharing mode.
Stuck on the carrot and
To the
asparagus.
top screen, you should get an orange drop down that says, lets you say stop sharing.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go. Thank you. So questions I have, Directors Yanni DiNardo, Morrison, and Wilson. Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Sarah and Asia. I am really concerned. I think this is fabulous. I totally believe that we should be doing more farming, and I'm very enthusiastic about it all, but I'm very nervous as well, considering Cowichan Bay, which is Area D, 70% farmland. The latest farm that just sold 50 acres was over 2.4 million. And once again, we're going to have, the rumor is, a winery. And I'm really concerned about diversity and being able to, well, we can't feed everyone grapes, and we can't, well, just can't live on wine. So I'm concerned about that. So how do you get your information out to farmers that go directly, or people that buy these lands, they go directly to wineries without seeing how they can diversify?
Do you want to take that, Asia?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. The outreach we do is, it's amazing how much word of mouth happens, but then there's also lots of media and newspaper, magazine publications that are out there that people find, and Google searches is actually the most common way people find us. People just reach out looking for ways to lease land, and we come up at the top. And so I get lots of phone calls from people who've just bought land. It's all the time these days. There's a huge amount of land turnover happening, and yeah, people call and they don't even necessarily even have possession of the land yet. So we schedule for when they do. And regarding vineyards in particular, I think that it is, it's quite a commitment for someone to look to establish a vineyard on their land. And oftentimes they're looking for something that isn't necessarily such a long-term lease. And obviously we would prefer to lease long-term to farmers through our program as well. But maybe, it's looking at a 5 or 10-year lease rather than a vineyard, which generally speaking would be a much longer term commitment. But I actually have only interacted with maybe 1 or 2 landowners who are interested in establishing vineyards on their property. Most who reach out to me are looking for food production.
Well, that's great. Good to know. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, and I've got 2 quick questions, but one of them might take a bit of an answer. So I'm really concerned about the succession or transition planning for our older farmers, and we know that there are people that have been business owners that have not been able to find someone to come in, buy their business, and they've just shut them down and retired, which is such a shame because these are viable businesses. And I think it's the same for farming, but the land costs are so expensive. So do you have any general comments on that whole idea of succession planning for the farm? It involves estate planning, and there's usually families involved. And my second question is, are the new people coming in more interested in cash crops or just doing more of the same? There's so many forage crops that are being raised in this area for the not only the horse business, but the dairy business. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The vast majority of people who reach out are interested in doing organic food production. Mixed organic agriculture is kind of the most common crops people are interested in growing. Rarely do I get people. I've had 1 person inquire about wanting to grow hay, lease land for hay production, and it was a bit of a strange request because that it just doesn't come up. The hay producers are out there. It's already happening, and there's so much land in hay already, and so yeah, mostly food production. Once in a while, there'll be someone who's interested in like planting an orchard and doing a cidery or something like that. And obviously, that could be a match with someone who's interested in doing a vineyard or whatever and having a bigger, longer term, more infrastructure kind of thing built out. But yeah, not very much hay or grain production at all.
Thank you. So next I have Director Wilson and then Director Marsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. This is something that I've been getting interested more and more over the last couple of years because the Cowichan Valley is a lovely place to be. We've already touched on the cash crops, so that's one of my questions out the way. But it is a concern that the cash crops are being more got into than anything else. And one of the other things that's already been touched on, but I'd like to take a little bit further, is the succession planning. And that's another one where really the farmers are being driven out because there is none. But I'm going to be very careful what I say here, but I got to say it anyway. This board can take some of the responsibility for that, because we've had people come to us and saying we'd like to build another house for our children to take over while we help out as well. And we've turned those applications down purely because it happens to be on farmland, even though that farmland has not produced anything, that particular area, it may be only half an acre. We as a board need to look very carefully at turning down those applications with parents and children trying to build something on their own land. And that's more of a comment than a question, but this is something that you as young agrarians need to come to us and push more and more to give it more consideration to building the second dwelling, so that those children are able to stay there and live, as opposed to just selling the land off. Thank you.
Okay, great. That was just a comment. Oh, okay, go ahead, Ms. Dent.
Oh, I'd just like to say, like, if we had the solution for all of these farms that were ready for, to be changed over, the management or the holding thereof, then that would be amazing. Like, if there's an agency in France, a government agency, the acronym is SAFER, SAFER, and they actually acquire farms that are ready to be sold, and they hold them until they can be sold back to farmers. And they have several agencies across France that work with new farmers coming in to run farm co-ops, etc., to take these holdings. So our program is really focused around lease agreements, because that's the space that we can really operate in. But with market failure for agriculture in British Columbia and southern BC, where the cost of land and production far exceeds what a new farmer can earn on the land, this issue around farms, being in succession and not having successors because the land base is so expensive, is really, one that we need a lot of money to solve. And it's a very complicated one. And the province actually had a land bank way back in the day, around the time when the ALC was being established, that actually did buy farmland and hold it and sell it to farmers. But that didn't last very long. So unfortunately, a lot of these new farmers are in the leasing space. But we have seen people figure out how to start their businesses and get their feet underneath them and stay in and keep farming. So that's what our hope is right now in the market failure context that we're operating in today. Thank you.
Thank you. So next I have directors Marsh and then Smith.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have 3 questions. Would you say we're below average for a region you've come in land matching? No? Okay. So it's a struggle everywhere in BC.
Sorry, what do you mean by below average?
Well, 44, you've been around, you came to us quite a few years ago, and if only 44 acres have been land matched, that just doesn't seem like a lot to me.
Oh, it's actually a really great number.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, our program is adapted from a Quebec land bank program. So basically we collaborated. Quebec has the only province, like they have 45 land matchers across Quebec. And the first year for a land matcher there, like 1 match is considered a success. Second year, 3 matches. Third year, 5 matches. So 14 in the CVRD direct is actually a great number. And the CVRD has been instrumental in helping us to operate in the region with the support it has provided to date. It's kind of like a pioneer stakeholder is how I would describe it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Do you know how many pounds of produce has been produced? You can say yearly.
I love that question. It's actually one of the evaluation markers that we use for our business mentorship program is volume of food produced. We have not been capturing that data for the land matching program, but I think that we actually should. So I'm sorry I can't give you that number, but maybe in the next couple of years we'll be able to provide some of that type of data.
That would be great. Thank you. And where do the farmers normally market? Or do they sell to grocery stores? Do they sell at the curbside? Do they go to the market, or all of the above?
I think all of the above. Direct to consumer, I think, is the majority of sales. So farmers markets, farm gate, community supported agriculture boxes.
I was going to ask about that.
Restaurants, and then, I think in Asia, there's some people doing some wholesale to groceries as well.
Yeah, there are some. And I also could just quickly touch on the acres. Vancouver Island, obviously, there's much smaller parcels, and so it's hard to match really large tracts of land. The huge numbers are happening in bigger, parts of the province where there's more land happening. So here it's common to have matches happening on smaller acreages where huge amounts of food come out of 1 acre.
I know.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of food come out of my backyard, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear that you're happy with how it's going. I had a different idea that it would be like 300 people, but because there's so much land here. But if you're feeling it's going well, that's great, and thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, we'd love it if we could advertise it as like a dating service for farmers, and we'd make 1,000 matches a year, and it would be like 1 million acres. But that's actually not how it works. Like, agriculture is very much like a slower growth process, and there's so much that goes into starting a new farm business. So on average, it takes us, like, if you take all of our match program participants, it takes at least half a year to develop a match. So we think that the numbers for the CVRD are quite successful, but your question is very common to all the local governments that we work with and many stakeholders. They think that the number of matches is low, but actually we think it's really on average for what a land matching program would do, and so it feels like success to us.
Great. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have now Director Smith probably to close. Director Smith. Oh,
thank you. I enjoy anything to do with agriculture, whether it's just growing a tomato on your property to encourage sustainability. We know that sustainability is getting less every time we turn around. I have a couple of questions. One is the green gold product out there, the cannabis. How is this impacting the matching? Because we're seeing more and more of our farmland sold, not just for vineyards, but for also the green gold product. And I was listening into the estate planning and wondering if there's a way that the federal government or the provincial government has a way of working towards some sort of estate planning that can help as the ALR and the ALC are under the province. So do we have any way of supporting, like, a letter to them and asking for some sort of estate planning situation to assist?
Yeah, so the province does offer some financial support for farmers to work with succession planners. That is part of their business development services. That's common to many of the other provinces across Canada, is that they have funding through the Canadian Agricultural Partnership for business development, and succession planning is part of that. They probably don't. I don't know what the uptake numbers are for that program, but people can work through the Ministry of Agriculture for some financial support towards succession planning. And then I'll let Asia respond to the question about cannabis, because I'm not sure if she's getting a lot of inquiries for the region.
We do get some inquiries from people looking to grow cannabis. Although, given how complex it is to get through all the hoops around the regulations around that, especially since you need an address in order to apply for a license to grow cannabis, and it's a bit of a catch-22. It's very, very challenging, and I haven't supported any matches and people looking to grow cannabis on farmland. It's just something that we. There's too many obstacles, and we don't see it generally as something that we want to put energy into supporting. And on the landowner side, we don't get any inquiries from people looking for people to grow cannabis on their land. Most often, that's kind of the one thing landowners don't want to see happen on their land.
I think for a lot of new and young farmers, the investment to meet the federal protocol is so high. It's like multi-million-dollar business. So for a lot of our new and young people that are just in startup, they're not often at that level of, they're not often that business ready for that kind of multi-million-dollar cannabis facility installation.
They don't often have a full sense of what's required.
Okay, follow-up, Director Smith? No, okay, I'll move to Director McGonigal.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. We hear constantly about food security on Vancouver Island, and successorship of those farms is imperative to see that to fruition. I was excited to see that 50% of your land matches on Vancouver Island resided within the Cowichan Valley. And that's something to be proud of, whether it's 4 acres or 44 or 400. That 50% of the concentration on Vancouver Island resides within the Cowichan Valley. So we are far ahead of other parts of the island. I'm wondering if reinitiating the provincial land bank may be a political avenue that we would be able to take, put pressure on the province, and I'm just suggesting an initial discussion on how we can reinitiate that program. Because I do recall the success of that prior to the ALR and ALC. So I would encourage my fellow directors to consider that, whether it be in a resolution or in conversations that we have with the appropriate ministry. More of a comment than anything, but thank you very much for your time.
Oh, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, I'd just like to thank you both for not only the presentation, but all your good work in the community. So there's our
Thank you
virtual
for your time today.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you. So we will move to our next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item D2 is Simon Wing, Waterline Resources, on behalf of the Cobble Hill Aquifer Interagency Task Group regarding groundwater quality results.
Hey, good morning.
Welcome, Mr. Wing.
Hi there. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Just 1 second. What was my email here? You guys can see the presentation here?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, welcome. Good morning. My name is Simon Wing, and yeah, I'm working for Waterline Resources. And yes, the CVRD contracted Waterline to help complete the 2020 and 2021 groundwater monitoring program at Fisher Road. I have a map here. So the site, which is the area of investigation, is located between Highway number 1 here and Cobble Hill. And the site comprises of 3 land owners or parcels, sorry, excuse me, go back. And those consist of 1345, 1355, and 1360 Fisher Road. So before getting into the results and kind of the site, I just want to give you a quick history. So I'm going to move this little speaker thing. I'm going to close this. So in 2002, the ENV, which is the Ministry of Environment, completed an initial site investigation on the groundwater conditions at the site. And following that investigation, the CVRD and other local municipal agencies and provincial agencies completed several investigations. They installed some monitoring wells and conducted groundwater sampling prior to Waterline's involvement. Up until about 2018 was the last large investigation. Since 2018, the FLNRO, which is the Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development, they completed a regional study, so quite large study of all the South Cowichan Valley aquifers. And they have their report also online, as I didn't indicate, the CVRD does as well on their website. And that kind of gave context to the general groundwater conditions in the South Cowichan Valley. On the meantime, these owners of these 3 land use or these 3 properties, as I've indicated here, were also doing some work on their own. They were mandated through various pollution prevention orders, operating permits, and local CVRD bylaws to implement source control, which is basically making sure that there's no contamination entering the groundwater. And they're also mandated to do some monitoring. I should point out on the last bullet here that the 1360 Fisher Road ceased operations in 2017, and no investigation has really been done since then the CBRD is requesting that a preliminary site investigation be completed during rezoning. So a little bit of background for those who are unaware or aware. This is a map here of the aquifers that underlie the site and generally speaking are in the area. And that South Cowichan Valley study would have definitely covered these two aquifers in their investigation of groundwater conditions. So here you can see you have Aquifer 197 and 206. And the takeaway from this slide here is that the site kind of straddles both aquifers. Both aquifers are characterized pretty much the same. They're both a sand and gravel aquifer. They both have a pretty deep groundwater level. The difference is that one is semi-confined and one is more confined. And to understand what that means, I have a little schematic here in the corner. So a unconfined aquifer is where you have the water table in the aquifer more directly connected to ground surface and infiltration of surface water, so precipitation. And a confined aquifer is an aquifer that is below a less permeable layer, such as a silt or a clay. So that comes into play in our next few slides. So as I mentioned, CBRD did do some work. They've obviously installed monitoring wells. And some of the landowners, specifically 1355 Fish Road, has also installed monitoring wells to kind of characterize groundwater conditions. And here I just want to give you a kind of overview of the site. So you have a monitoring well here, which is 13-4, and this is in a location that is south of the site in what we call up gradient of the site. And then you have some wells on the down gradient site, and I'll explain up gradient, down gradient in the next slide. You have two monitoring wells there. You also have a monitoring well right in the middle, which is also kind of characterizing the down gradient conditions of 1360 Fisher Road. And then 1355 Fisher Road has two wells itself that they're monitoring on an ongoing basis. One of which is a production well, meaning it's a well that they're using to pump water from the aquifer for operations. So moving on. As I suggested, I'd kind of give you an idea of what upgrading and downgradient means. So upgrading and downgradient is the idea that we have an upgradient location, upgradient of the groundwater flow movement, and we have downgradient locations, which is downgradient of the groundwater flow movement of the site. So here I've indicated this arrow. We've kind of characterized the groundwater flow as in a north-northwest direction. We've provided velocity. So if you can imagine a drop of water hitting the ground at any point on the site, specifically, let's say at the upgrading location, it will make its way through that unsaturated zone, get into the groundwater table. And once it gets into the groundwater, it will move at a speed of 4.5 meters per year. And if you take the distance between the upgradient and downgradient location, which is about 440 meters, you get a travel time across the site about 97 years. And this is just natural conditions, not including any enhancement of groundwater movement from pumping of the production well or any other domestic or wells in the area. So now that we have a sense of the site, I wanted to give you an idea of what the groundwater quality issues were. So one of the big issues that was identified in 2002, and which has been ongoing, been investigated ongoing, is nitrates. And so nitrates here, I'm going to move this. I think this is getting in our way here. There we go. So nitrates is the main groundwater issue. And to understand the groundwater issue, I think the three main things that we want to take away here is what is the source, what is the pathway, and what is the receptor. So over time, the source has definitely been identified and fingerprinted using isotopes, which is a chemical signature of the water. And we've determined that the two types of sources are from an organic source and an inorganic source. Organic being organic matter such as composting, septic fields, agricultural use from manures. Inorganic is pretty straightforward. Chemical fertilizers is the main culprit. So if we take those sources and we kind of associate to what we know about the general area, we have offsite agriculture and septic, which is up gradient of the site. That's probably contributing to some form of nitrate that's getting onto the site. And that's probably ongoing. We know that there is a community wastewater system upgrading to the site, but there definitely are some septic users and agricultural users in the area. And then historically, we know from on-site operations that there's been composting at both 1345 and 1355. And 1360 operated as a vegetable greenhouse, which used fertilizers in their operations, we believe. So now that we know the source, the pathway, so if you can imagine all these land use practices are happening at surface, if there's no containment of any of the land use practices, that can, let's call it contaminative nitrates. Nitrates moves through the unsaturated zone and it gets itself into the groundwater. And that happens over time as water is as there's precipitation and water is now moving through the system into the groundwater table. And our receptor, well, there's many receptors. There's surface water bodies, but the main thing I wanted to point out here is the drinking water quality standards. So there's a lot of groundwater users, people who drink the water in the area, and I just want to indicate here that the standard for drinking water is 10 milligrams per liter, and that will come up in our next couple slides. So getting right into the results. So as I sort of gave you the overview of the site, there was upgradient and downgradient and some locations within the site. If we start with the upgradient location of the site, which is that 13-4, it's the most southerly location, we can see here that we have nitrate concentration slowly increasing over time. I've indicated two lines here. There's the yellow line, which is that background concentration from that study from the FLNRO, suggesting that the background concentration for South Cowichan Valley aquifers is 0.5 milligrams per liter. And then I've also indicated this red line here, which is the Canadian Drinking Water Standard guideline, which is 10 milligrams per liter. So you can see over time, concentrations have slowly increased. And the frequency of sampling has increased in 2020 as operators and the land use owners are also required to sample, and as Waterline completed our sampling in 2020 and 2021 as well. So we believe the nitrate concentrations are a result, or the increases are a result of the upgradient land use practices that are as groundwater is moving across the site and bringing nitrates across the site. So then if we move right down gradient of the site, and specifically down gradient of 1345 and 1355, we can see that nitrate concentrations are fluctuating and decreasing, which is a good thing. The decrease obviously is a great thing. So what we can take away from here is that source control measures that these two operators or owners have put in place are limiting increases in nitrates and actually decreasing. So we're not seeing any more inputs of nitrates into the groundwater, we believe. You can see that it is above the 0.5 milligrams per liter, as you expect. And in this case here, down gradient site, the concentrations are approaching the Canadian Drinking Water Standard. I point out, that both these facilities are required to continue monitoring over time. So now if we move on to the site of the 1355 Fisher Road, where they are required to monitor, and we've also taken their information and compiled it, we can see from one of their most recent monitoring wells that was just drilled in 2019, so very recent, they only have 4 points, but we can see concentrations are hovering around that 10 milligrams per liter and actually have increased. I can say though, since this report was published, concentrations have now decreased and are now below 10 milligrams per liter again. The pumping well, which is that well that they're using for operational use, concentrations were quite high at the very beginning in 2008 and have since decreased from about 80 down to about 20. So we've seen a large decrease in concentrations. And we believe that the decrease is due to dilution as groundwater is moving across the site as this well is pumping water and pushing water into the well, and then obviously to surface. And then finally, our location that's right in the middle of the site, which is down gradient of 1360 Fisher Road. We also see nitrate concentrations decreasing over time. Again, it ceased operations in 2017. There's no more inputs of, we don't believe, obviously they're not putting any more fertilizer on the ground. Nothing's happening there since for almost 4 years. And we see that concentrations are decreasing. We know that pumping from that other well, which is at 1355, is moving nitrate concentrations probably from this location towards its well and to surface. So that's some kind of containment and some kind of remediation, if you want to call it. It's moving that contaminant and that nitrate source from out of the ground. So our conclusions from the study, nitrate concentrations are definitely exceeding background concentrations for the South Cowichan Valley aquifers. A little context, that study reviewed a couple hundred wells, but I think it's 248 wells, and they have an average concentration of nitrate. These wells are all over the places within industrial areas, residential areas, and so obviously we can see that our concentrations at the site are quite an exceedance of that. We can say in a positive note too, though, that source control measures are definitely helping limit leaching of nitrates into the groundwater. Concentrations, as we've indicated before, are not increasing. And then at 1360, there's not much work going on there, but as I've indicated, the CVRD is requesting that the new owner complete a rezoning application. So what that might tell us is that, in the rezoning application, there would be an investigation. So that could potentially help us in further delineating any potential nitrate sources on that site. And you might be wondering at the very end here, what's the outlook for the future? Well, I think what we can say strongly is that decreases in nitrates are happening. Unfortunately, there are increases at the upgradient location of the site, but we can expect that concentrations will take some time to get closer to the 10 milligrams per liter, which is the Canadian drinking water standard. And yeah, thank you very much. I know that was a quick presentation. Hopefully it's about 10 minutes. But yeah, thanks again.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have some questions.
Yep, I'll just stop sharing here.
Great. Okay, so see Dr. Sebring, Nicholson, Wilson, and Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being probably the most non-scientifically minded person here in terms of, I didn't do well in biology in high school, let's put it that way. Explain to me again the difference between concentrations and background concentrations. I'm a little confused because I heard you say, a level of 10 meets the standard and we're at 0.5 and all of a sudden we're over 10. I'm a little bit confused about that.
Right. So the Canadian drinking water standard for non-treated groundwater is 10 milligrams per liter. So they say if you have a concentration below 10 milligrams per liter, groundwater is quite safe to drink. I'm not a biologist myself either, so I can't speak to the detrimental effects of it above and how long. The 0.5 milligrams per liter is a number that what we believe the natural conditions of these aquifers is. So if you were to say that there was no human activity, you would expect that the concentration would be about 0.5. So order of magnitude less. And nitrates are naturally occurring, so you'd expect some form of nitrate in groundwater.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Nicholson.
Thank you. I really thought your report and presentation were great. I am wondering about the off-site contamination that appears to be moving through. And I'm wondering if you can use the rate of movement to pinpoint where that's probably coming from.
I think you can. So the gradient, which was so there's a gradient which we calculated to get the velocity, and so the gradient is like the water level difference between the wells. So the gradient might vary off-site, but generally speaking, you're correct. You can kind of pinpoint how fast the water is moving over time. The trouble there, though, is historically, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm sure you guys know better, but it's been an agricultural area in the past. It's been used and changed hands over time. And so, yeah, I mean, you could get a sense, maybe from our little snip of time from 2008 or 2013 when the well was installed till today, that's 7 years or 7 years or 8 years, sorry, how long, where it could be coming from, but it would be hard to really know exactly how far it's been moving and who exactly. But we know that land use practices in that area, I mean, there are septic users and farms and such. So.
Great. And can I have a follow-up question?
Yes.
I'm curious, how often do you think this should be monitored in the future? So what is once a year overkill or?
Well, so the owners of the sites are doing quarterly sampling and yearly sampling. So they're doing quite an extensive sampling protocols to get seasonal changes. So I believe that, the current monitoring program that the owners are required to do by operating permits and local bylaws is pretty sufficient and could change as results start to plateau or get better or whatever, right? I mean, they can file different amendments to their operating permits. So, but I think at the moment they're going pretty hard on sampling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, I have Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Simon. That was a good. It's a good report. It's very comprehensive. This is more of a comment than a question than anything else, and this is a very, very comprehensive and complex report. And I'd like to really pass on my sincere thanks to all those concerned for the hard work involved, the staff, the consultants at CHITG, and the others who have been involved in the compilation and presentation. This water question throughout Canada and throughout the world it's an essential element in any watershed, and it supports not only the flora and the fauna, but also the people who live and may want to live within the vicinity of our valley watersheds. And in essence, protecting any watershed starts with the protection of the source commodity, which is what the whole point of this exercise was, to monitor that source, to protect that source. We already have a drinking water and watershed protection function, and the goals of that service are pretty well known. I'm not going to go into those goals right now, but basically this is just to say this is coming up again in this meeting, and I'll speak more of it in that case. But basically, this is just to thank everybody that's been involved in doing what they've done so far for the general population and for the health of these two huge aquifers. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. So on my list, I have Directors Yanni DiNardo and Marksman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Wing. I'd first of all like to congratulate you on your presentation. We as directors see a lot of presentations, and yours was very clear, short and sweet, and we got the message, which is not easy when there's so much information. So I'd like to just send my gratitude to you for the way you've presented. I think you've done a really good job. 1360 Fisher Road. I believe, I moved to Fairfield Road, which was beside it in 1969. And that was the time when, of course, it was just the raw earth. There's no so what I'm understanding from your presentation is the years have gone by. Now they closed in 2017. So things are going to be cleaning up because there obviously a high concentration of nitrates came from the fertilizer there. So is that what it's looking like to you after seeing your presentation? It looks like we're coming to the era where we are cleaning up the environment and it's working.
Yeah. So that whole source receptor pathway, do you think the source is now there's no source, the source is stopped? The source can stay within the soil column, the unsaturated zone, and it doesn't move very fast. Like 4.5 meters per year is very slow. So you could argue that yes, the source has stopped. There'd be benefit to investigating, again, as CBRD is suggesting with the PSI2, sorry, that it would be good to know the extent and maybe have another well there. I don't know anything about what's going to go on in the future, but yes, you can say that pretty definitively that the source has stopped, and that's a good thing for sure. Yeah. And same with the other locations.
Thank you so much.
Director Markman.
Again, I echo everybody else, and thank you very much. Water security is very important, and as Director Wilson was saying, it's going to come up for discussion. I have two questions. One, sorry, Al, is more of a chemistry question. When you talk about the nitrates and the movement of water, I see nitrates maybe as a contaminant, but it's not. It's always been there. But wouldn't diffusion allow the movement of nitrates through the aquifer much faster than just the movement of water? Maybe you can speak a little bit of that, and I have a second question.
Sure. So we and not to say that we did this purposely, but we kept the reports quite simple in the sense we didn't get into the processes of the nitrification or denitrification cycle. So we did do a lot of other sampling, not just nitrates. We sampled a whole suite of parameters, general parameters. And so what we did notice is that the main process of movement, or at least the degradation or the reduction in nitrates, was dilution, We looked for signatures of denitrification, which is a process that naturally occurs with organisms and breakdown of nitrate to nitrite and then back to nitrogen. We didn't see any of that. It's because of the groundwater conditions being quite deep, but it's not anoxic. There's not a limited amount of oxygen or bacteria growth. So long story is, we didn't really see anything to suggest anything other than, and then the main factor being dilution or through time. And that's kind of what our thought was at this point. So.
And a follow up on a different note, and I'd like to get your opinion or thoughts, I guess that's the same, on climate change and some of the things that we're facing around precipitation and the impact of that on the aquifer over the next couple of decades, and then consequently, does that change our process?
Right. So in our report, there is, so we didn't mention this because this maybe wasn't the focus, but some of the wells have these things called transducers. They monitor water level changes. There's a continuous record on the site, and the province has these things called the PAGOIN. It's the Provincial Observation Groundwater Network that monitors the changes and fluctuations in water levels. So really quickly at the site, we definitely saw a decreasing trend in water levels until about 2016 or something like that. In the report, it's more clear. Maybe there was some drought years. I personally wasn't living on the island at the time. And then we've seen kind of an increase in precipitation or an increase of recharge to the aquifer since then. We see fluctuations seasonally. So on top of that larger trend, there's seasonal fluctuations where water levels are higher and lower within the 1 year. We can say that we had some pretty heavy rains in 2020, December and October, and we saw definitely some changes in chemistry. So water is still getting into the aquifer, it's still recharging. Overall, as a whole scale, the water level elevation hasn't negatively shifted or positively shifted. The province does do that, and they assess thresholds of increasing, decreasing trends in different aquifers. So I divert to say that the province is doing that on a larger scale as a climate change initiative. But locally, we didn't see anything to suggest that the aquifer was depleting at this time in the sense of a volume of water remaining. So
thank you.
That's local though, so it could be changing in a larger scale. But.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I think Director McGonigal is the last one on my list.
Well, thank you very much, Simon, for your presentation. I follow with Director Sebring. That was very informative and down to my level. My question is on the recharging of the aquifer. And with the example that you showed of the pumping of the water on the one site and the reductions within that, the flushing of the aquifers and the recharging values of that, would there be any implications of the flushing of the aquifer and the recharging times to mitigate some of the nitrates?
Right. So we didn't look. I didn't look at this in any kind of quantitative scenario. I was alluding that there's many reports that were completed previous to Waterline's involvement. The Western Water 2018 report, which is on the CBRD website, goes into the capture zone of that well and different pumping rates. They use 100 meters cubed per day, 50 meters cubed per day, and a smaller volume, and they kind of give you a sense of where the capture zone would be. It's hard to know. Again, I'm not pretending diverting to the province, but the province is also doing work on, apart from just changes in levels, the thresholds. So how many users are using the water versus how much water they think is there and how much water is getting into the ground. And then when they're allocating their licenses, they're considering all that, right? So the big thing that I know, and I'm not speaking for the province, but that is how many people are registered and how many people have licenses is really hindering how they can assess that. But maybe simply put, I think the amount of water that they're pumping, which is not very much on the Groundwater scheme, and which is acting as a containment for this nitrate, I would argue that it's not a detrimental, if that's the answer to your question. And they've been using that water for a long time. it sounds like, I'm not sure how long they've been composting there, but it sounds like it hasn't been negative. So.
Great, and just a follow-up comment, if I may, Mr. Chair. I think we've struggled with the health of aquifers within the Cowichan Valley and mapping of those aquifers, and I think it's important that we have the information on throughout the Cowichan Valley, not just the south end, but even up in Area H, where there is some concerns on aquifers there and the health and viability of the service of those aquifers.
Thank you. Just maybe my final question from myself. I thought someone might ask, but they haven't. Just on your comment about the 97-year travel time across the site, could you elaborate a little? Does that mean, does it really take, say, nitrates that long to move across the site, or what's the significance of that travel time?
Yeah, and so nitrates is and maybe that was, I missed the question. I'm just gonna go to the name here by Ben. Is that nitrates, and I can't speak to this specifically, are not necessarily conservative. It's like, so for example, chloride is very conservative. It does not get attenuated or bonded to anything in the soil properties. It moves very, very quickly. So you'd expect it moves as quickly as the groundwater flow. Nitrate, the properties of nitrates might be slower, and we were questioned on this too, as the speed being 90, being that slow. But yeah, in theory, if there was no enhancement of groundwater flow movement, you'd expect that if you dropped a drop of oil or something at the one end of the site, and it would you might see it move across the site in 97 years if it was very conservative and it didn't get attenuated or diffused or anything like that. So somewhere in between there, I think you can expect that that's how long groundwater would take, or the movement of this nitrate plume would take, based on other pumping and the fact that some of this is breaking down a bit. But like I said, we didn't see any indication of the breakdown through that denitrification and changes in other parameters. Everything else indicated nothing was happening. So.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Well, seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation. And there's a virtual applause. So with that, I'd like to ask Ms. Legault to move on, although I see now we're at 1 hour. I know we've got Fisher Road coming up as our first report. Should we take a 10-minute break? Does that sound? See any nodding on that? Are we ready for a coffee? Yeah. Okay. I'll wait for Ms. Legault to come back on. There we go. Okay, so shall we take a break and return at 10:40? Okay, thanks.
Video's live.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone, and let's go to the next item on our agenda, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to reports. Item R1 is a report from Environmental Services Division on the 2021 groundwater monitoring of nitrate concentrations in the Fisher Road area, and this report is for information.
Thank you. So who do we have? Is that Ms. Miller? The presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. You have before you the staff report that accompanies Mr. Wing's presentation this morning. You'll see that it is for information purposes, and the report is the follow-up to the request of the director a number of years ago to continue monitoring for a 2-year period of time. So the report is in front of you, and you can also see that the situation has changed with regards to permitting of the facilities, and so they are now required to maintain the monitoring as a product of that permitting process. we're not recommending any additional work at this particular point in time. And I would like to point out that the report that Mr. Wing referenced of the province of BC in terms of the background characterization of the aquifers water quality was a report that was in partnership with the CVRD, who provided staff time and funding for that report. And it's that type of report that would be under the drinking water and watershed protection function going forward for the characterization of all of the aquifers in the region that provide substantial drinking water to our populations. I'd also like to point out that over 50% of the region's population drinks water from their own private wells, and so the characterization of the groundwater resources across the region is a priority under the drinking water and watershed protection function. So with that, you have the report in front of you.
Okay, great. I will start a speakers list. I have so far Directors Morrison, Acton, and Wilson.
Thank you,
Director
Mr.
Wilson.
Chair. Through you to Ms. Miller, and perhaps I should have asked our delegate this question, but he painted a very clear picture. And I guess going into the future, the thing that I'm interested in is there still appears to be inputs, upgradient of the area in question, and you know, those could be different sources, but we have determined that there's inorganic and organic nitrates that are still being input into the system. Now, would I be correct in assuming that if we started to see rising levels that were outside of what we've seen so far, would there be the possibility either through the drinking water and watershed protection or perhaps partnerships with the province to not necessarily target source but isotope the different inputs to determine if we're seeing, you know, more septic inputs or more farm related inputs with the inorganic fertilizers? Is that something that we might possibly be looking at in the future?
Miller.
Thank you. Apologies. One of the first steps is obviously to characterize the aquifer. Every aquifer has a slightly different chemical signature in terms of where the water is flowing through. Is it through karst or sand and gravel? Those sorts of things. And then the overlying characteristics in terms of land use activities. So for the background study that was done for Aquifer 197, those individual wells where we had partners allowed us to test the water quality. So we've got a very good picture spatially about where certain types of inputs are occurring over time. So it gives us an opportunity to go back to those particular partners in terms of the data acquisition and see if the signature has changed on an aquifer basis. We also need to look at some of the other aquifers in the area as well. So this is just the beginning of the process of groundwater characterization. And as one of the directors pointed out, groundwater and groundwater protection is a major issue for us. But until the water modernization happened, the whole issue of groundwater protection and groundwater knowledge was really missing in the region. And so we're really playing a catch-up role, obviously in partnership with the province who's dealing with it at the provincial level and establishing additional requirements and regulations with regards to groundwater quality protection. But it's really up to us to link that back to land use practices and perhaps enhance some of the regulatory tools that we have over time. We need the information to be able to do that appropriately without necessarily zooming in on an area without looking at sort of the larger context piece.
Thank you. Next I have Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Miller. They're doing regular monitoring quite regularly, and Where does the community find that information, and is it being shared with CVRD? I'm assuming it's posted to the MOE website, or can you let us know?
Ms. Miller,
Sorry.
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to defer to Ilsa, who can maybe speak specifically about where the two facilities monitoring data goes to. My request has been that it goes into the CVRD data system, or that it be uploaded into the provincial EMS system, at which point it becomes public information, accessible easily without additional cost of data transformation. But I'll just double check with Ilsa to make sure that that is in fact part of the licensing requirement.
Hi there. So you're correct, Kate, in that it is uploaded to the EMS database. And in addition, Fisher Road Recycling, so 1355, their operating permit under the organic matter recycling regulation requires that the annual environmental report that includes the environmental monitoring data from these wells is shared with Island Health, the ministry, and the CVRD. But yeah, we're working towards having all the data going to the ministry's database, which is the EMS database.
Great, thank you. Fine with that, Director Acton? Okay, next, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more than a little disappointed that the staff report seems to recommend that no further monitoring by the CVRT and associated parties is recommended here, because it's widely acknowledged that the protection and preservation of our precious water resources, be they surface, river, lake, or subterranean, is absolutely paramount in these ever-changing times. And it seems that over an extended period, close proximity aquifers and other water sources throughout our regions have been stressed and may still be subjected to external aggression in the form of industrial, commercial, farming, and other activities. And this is especially true of concentrated areas in the South Cowichan. I do note, though, with some relief that thanks to the funding provided by this board in 2019 for full spectrum testing and regular monitoring, the latest waterline report indicates that previously high recorded levels of contaminants appear to be stabilizing and in some cases decreasing. Nitrate concentrations are dropping and potentially coming under control. And it's my earnest hope that this trend will continue. As the report shows, there are still some areas of concern, and my feeling is that it may be premature to consider that quality and quantity monitoring and testing is no longer necessary. Protecting the health of any aquifer currently may provide only limited benefits to today's citizens, but it is absolutely essential from a long-term ecological perspective. From a political angle, our residents are the ones who vote in elections, but their great-grandchildren are not yet on this planet and are therefore unable to exert any political pressure or to vote. If it were possible to ask those future generations for their input, they might well insist that elected officials think about them and to balance their future needs versus the legitimate needs of today's citizens. There is no doubt that it's very complex to be an elected official trying to balance the needs of today's citizens versus the needs of future generations and the natural environment. I believe that today's citizens will applaud us for our efforts to prepare for a better future for our generations yet to come. And that, respected colleagues, is what long-term leadership is all about. I have absolutely no wish to create conflict with the already established drinking water and watershed protection strategy, which is responsible for long-term monitoring of the aquifers by working with permanent and strategically located monitoring stations in order to gather the right data for the health assessments of the aquifers. However, I am asking this committee to support me in approving the following motion. A, that funding of up to $75,000 provided by Function 532, Drinking Water and Watershed Protection, adopted under Bylaw 4202, be approved for continuing full spectrum quantity and quality testing and monitoring of the aquifers in the South Cowichan areas. And B, that the funding be utilized biannually for a period of 2 years commencing in September 2021. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Wilson. So you're moving that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think Director Wilson should have to say that this committee recommends to the board that.
Okay, that's you okay with that, Director Wilson? Is it just the beginning of that? So we need a seconder. I see Director Sebring. Okay. So Ms. Legault, did you get that motion? Could we possibly hear that again?
I've got it written down, and I can send it to Ms. Legault if you like.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Good. So I still have Director Marsh on my speakers list. So Director Marsh.
Okay, I wasn't going to speak directly to the motion. Do I need to do that? Or can I kind of do it indirectly?
I'm not sure, Ms. Legault. Is there guidance on that?
I'm seeking more information, basically, and I think it would help me make a decision on this motion.
On the motion? Okay, then. Yeah.
It would help me. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Ms. Miller. When you talked about water modernization, I'm not aware of what that is, and I wonder if it's meant to include piped water and sewer, and if so, would that require incorporation in the south end? And are there any tools that the CVRD can use to require only natural fertilizer of farmland rather than the commercial that is made up of only about 4 different things?
Okay, who would like to try to answer that one?
If I may, I'm going to try and break their question down. So if I paraphrase and don't get it quite right, please let me know. So the first question was a clarification of the Water Act modernization, and my reference there was to the province of BC's modernization of the Provincial Water Act, which allowed the province to take into consideration the control over groundwater as well as groundwater quality and the establishment of regulations for both of those in terms of permitting for extraction, but also the implications for the protection of groundwater, which then gives us as local government the tools necessary to really make the drinking water and watershed protection function truly functional in terms of looking at the relationship between surface and groundwater quality issues and controls. So that's a very important step for us to consider, which then leads us to the reason why we need to establish groundwater quality parameters or objectives in the same way that we establish surface water quality objectives. Once we have an objective, then we can use that to apply regulatory tools to. You must stay within certain parameters within the state of objectives, recognizing again that most watersheds have slightly different signatures. Aquifers have different signatures as well. So as Mr. Wing pointed out, the sort of the background signature for nitrates in Aquifer 197 is in the 5 to 6 range, and we're now starting to see increases to that. So we can regulate those activities. The second question that I heard you ask was how this relates to piped water or what I would call utilities. For us, the issue under the drinking water program is to look at long-term water supply. Do we have enough water to provide to our communities for development purposes, human habitation, over and above what the environment needs for environmental flows. And so that requires us to develop, in concert with the province, water balance models. How much water is coming in, how much does the environment need, and how much can we extract within each of the systems, either from surface or from ground, to keep that system in balance. And we need data to do that properly. And so we're in the process right now of developing a regional hydrometric and climate monitoring system and network for the board's approval for investment into is the next stage of the drinking water program. So we will know what's happening in terms of climatic inputs, how much precipitation, and then also for many of our aquifers where we don't even have monitoring wells in place, to start to collect the background information. For many of our utilities, we don't necessarily track the surface or the groundwater conditions in terms of what's happening within the aquifer, so that would inform the utilities' requirements for conservation purposes, or to actually give us the information needed strategically for how many more houses could be served by that particular utility. Right now, we simply increase the pump size, not necessarily looking at the availability of the system to actually provide the water. So I'm hoping that answered your questions in a paraphrased way.
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Directors Wilson and Toporowski. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a little bit further information for the board members, the committee members, on the area. How big is Aquifer 197? And the information is contained in the South Cowichan Aquifer report by Barroso and Melnichenko. 197 is 39.7 square kilometers, and 198 is 104 square kilometers. And by comparison, Shawnigan Lake is 5.3 square kilometers, with Cowichan Lake 62 square kilometers. So 197, 206, 198, they're huge, and something that we would have to protect as much as we can. And there is actually a replenishment deficit on 197. So it's going down very slowly. And if we can expect more rain to go or less rain to fall, we're going to lose it. So we have to protect that which we've got. And that's why I'm asking for comprehensive testing here. But these are big areas, and they're supplying 17,000, 18,000 people. So that's just background information for the board. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Wilson. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just listening to, you know, the groundwater quality and aquifers and whatnot, and I just think of, you know, with this study that happened, the results that we just had, and how easy, you know, it was, like as Director Ianardo mentioned, that was easier to understand, and it was a good presentation. Of how our groundwater is connected to our source. And then, as Ms. Miller mentioned, we have to look at these studies and take the information about our groundwater quality and connect that to our land use planning. And I think this is going to help in future developments on water. And I'm interested to hear what other members say about this motion. But I think this is, you know, something in the right direction of looking at an issue instead of, you know, fighting for one thing in our community, because this is going to probably affect us all. And and if we look at the funding going towards this, and maybe in the future we might need something to do some sort of study somewhere else, and this could be open to all the directors for for something to, move towards in the future. But I just want, I do like the the thing that Mr. Wing said was, basically what he was saying, what I got out of it was if we remove people, it will go back to the way it was. So I'm just pointing that out. But he said, based on the current source control measures, decrease in the nitrate concentrate is below the guidelines, and concentration is expected to take some time to come down. So I think we're going in the right direction. And it is good that, we were able to find something to contain the source of whatnot. And I'm in favor of, more studies of that happening again. But I mean, for the rezoning and the application and for them to look at more information bringing forward, I'm in favor of that. But I'm interested to hear what the other board members have to say about this moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I have Directors Nicholson, Kuhn, and Acton. So Director Nicholson. And Morrison.
Thank you. I think to speak to the motion. I think what disturbed me the most about the report was the fact that there is contamination coming in from offsite. And so I agree completely with Director Toporowski that this is really about land use, and we need to make sure that we don't have inappropriate land uses on top of vulnerable aquifers in the future. So I'm behind the drinking water watershed protection program completely. And the motion is asking us to divert another $75,000 from that to specific sampling of the monitoring wells in this area at this site. And I am trying to understand what would be a duplicate from what would already be happening by the owners of those sites, and what won't be done that we really should be thinking about making sure it gets done. So my question is specifically about the well 13.4. So that is being monitored, I understand, on a voluntary basis by the Fisher Road Recycling. And so will that continue, or is that something that we'll need to do? Because that's the one that's next to the, up gradient of the where the greenhouses were. So that's my first question.
Ms. Miller, would you like that one?
Sorry. I'm not entirely sure. I will leave it to Ilse to answer the question about that particular well. However, I will go back to the issue around the watershed and the aquifer characterization. So the study that was done in concert with the province for Aquifer 197 looked at a number of wells in the particular area. And it did identify a number of issues that should be followed up on with regards to ongoing management of septic fields, ongoing management and adjustments of the sewage treatment facility, which has just been upgraded. And so there are some opportunities to do some additional monitoring of that facility to see if the adjacent monitoring wells show some changes to effluent dispersal. So I think there are a number of things that need to happen within the watershed, and that's part of a process in terms of looking at that study and undertaking the following steps. With the specifics of the upland upland monitoring well, I'll let Ilse answer that particular question. If you've got a second, Ilse, and you're still here.
Excuse me, Ilse, is it possible for you to turn your video on?
Sorry, my camera is not working.
Okay, go ahead then.
Yeah, so in regards to the question of monitoring well 13-4, which is upgradient, yes, it's correct that Fisher Road Recycling is voluntarily sampling this well. And the reason that I understand that they're doing that is that it gives them a holistic picture of what's going on as they compare the results from their other wells. There is no guarantees that they're going to continue to monitor it forever, but we have had no indications that they're going to stop monitoring it this well. As a suggestion, if they do, we could bring forward this question again. And I note, similar to what Kate Miller mentioned, that in the South Cowichan study, there are other wells that are showing elevated levels of nitrate beyond what this well is showing. So I recall concentrations of 7 milligrams per liter, just to provide a bit of a context of the bigger issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I do some follow-up here?
Yes, go ahead.
So then that's the quality issue. What about the quantity issue? Who is monitoring the quantity of the aquifer?
Thank you. So we have deployed a number of additional monitoring devices in the CVRD's utility systems across the region. We're also in the midst of, we have an RFP out right now for the development of a regional groundwater and surface water monitoring program. And we want that to drive, because right now the province has limited resources. They do have some observation wells in the area, but again, very, very limited and based on spot issues. What we want to develop is a robust monitoring strategy for the region that will identify a very logical, structured investment into monitoring, and then also ensure that there is a long-term investment in data collection so that we can really see some trends. So for example, in Aquifer 197, there are currently 5 monitoring wells within that aquifer, 2 which we don't have a lot of data for, 2 which show an increasing trend in groundwater levels, and 1 which shows a fairly dramatic trend in reducing or reduction of groundwater levels. There's some issues with that one. There may be well interference with agricultural extraction, and so we're looking more deeply into that. But at the end of the day, we really need to have a robust network as opposed to potluck all over the place. That also needs to link into the overall groundwater supply issue for the South Cowichan area, which is concerning to us. We've got data that indicates that it's a diminishing groundwater zone. And it's obviously of concern to the Mill Bay Waterworks group as well. So that is a process that we're undertaking at this point in time.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, I see Mr. Hatani and Mr. Guthers are both popped up. Mr. Hatani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just I wanted to clarify here, when we talk about monitoring and monitoring stations, there are 2 categories of them. One is permanent, one is actually for the evaluation and assessment of the health of the aquifer. And then there are others, like we talked about Fisher Road. Those are actually monitored to understand that if there is any contaminant leaving, the site, and if it is above, certain level, we detect that. The second category that I mentioned doesn't give us any indication of the overall health of the watershed. The permanent one, and we are not going to have a cluster in close proximity of all of those monitoring stations in one location. It has to be strategically placed, and that's why in our drinking water and watershed protection, we came up with a strategy both for surface water and groundwater, both for quality and quantity. So you have to go ahead and install actually those monitoring stations. A lot of them are permanent. So we have to actually monitor that on kind of regular basis. Things are changing. Yes, the human activity increases, but if I don't have the permanent monitoring kind of stations, how do I know the capacity of that aquifer and the quality of that? That actually becomes a helping us to make a decision. If we allow for any development to happen, what is the limitation of the development? So to me, is a structured kind of approach. And instead of actually doing a little bit here, a little bit there for a short term, yet it helps us to understand the activity and operation of those facilities, and we can go after them. It ties into their licensing. But it doesn't give me any kind of picture for long term. I wanted just to mention that and clarify that.
Okay, thank you. So I've collected quite a speakers list here. 5, I have Directors Kuhn, Acton, Morrison, McGonigal, and Sebring. So Director Kuhn. Oh, and Director Yana DiNardo.
Thank you. According to my experience with the environmental department, I consider them very knowledgeable, very diligent, and very careful. As far as I'm concerned, at times they're even, for my taste, too careful. So I am fully in favor of the report that has been presented, and I will not vote in favor of the motion that was put forward. Thank you.
Your Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I do acknowledge that we all hear things differently. So I heard that there's actually quite a bit of monitoring happening, and if it was necessary to have more monitoring at this time, it would have been in the report, as Director Kuhn pointed out. And I feel like this is not a very strategic move in the sense we're just looking at one when we're not looking at the whole picture. And this function, the motion proposes 10% of the funds in the function to go towards this, when 2 years ago we said the environmental services staff did not even want us to go ahead with this. And we supported the community by bringing in our own testing, because there was some doubt and some skepticism on the community part. And by no means was it going to be part of this function ongoing. And what I've also heard in the presentation is we've gotten a lot of data. It's not the type of monitoring that you do on such a regular basis as is being proposed. So I'm struggling. You know, we all want to vote in favor of water and aquifers and water protection. But if this was a really smart move with our limited funds that we've heard over and over that this function is not even funded enough, then I think it would have come in the report. And to suggest changing the work plan in a last minute without the support and working with staff beforehand is a real struggle. And I at this time cannot support the motion that's on the floor.
You, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for staff bringing a little bit of clarity to this. I'm just looking straight at the financial consideration segment of the report that reads that the work described in the report is included in the 2021 budget. No further focused monitoring work at the Fisher Road area is suggested at this time, over and above what composting facilities at 1345 and 1355 are required to carry out at their own cost. I understand the director wanting to ensure that there's full and robust monitoring, but the drinking water and watershed protection function has other priorities and goals. You know, well, directors have indicated a desire to not support the resolution that's on the floor. I would certainly not be comfortable making a decision on a motion like this until I had some further understanding as to what impact that would have on the budget and other work plan that the staff has already put together. So at this point, I know you've got other speakers on the list, Mr. Chair. If there was someone, or after they've spoken, if there was interest in a referral motion to staff to find out what the impact would be, what other works would be delayed, and whether we could proceed based on the recommendation in this report, I'd be prepared to make that referral motion.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Director McGonigal.
I will yield to the referral motion if you wish, Mr. Chair, and gauge the appetite of my fellow directors.
Okay, I had Director Sebring, Yanni DiNardo, and Kuhn. Anybody?
Yeah, if I may. I'm not sure we need a referral motion because this goes to the heart of, of what I was going to ask. I seconded the motion to get it on the floor out of respect for Director Wilson and his concern for his constituents. There's no guarantee I'm going to vote in favor of it. What I want to know, and I don't know that we need a full-fledged staff report, perhaps Ms. Miller or Mr. Carruthers can just give us a quick précis in terms of if we divert 10% of that drinking water watershed protection fund to this specific purpose, do we have a sense of what other work will get undone or will not get done that's scheduled for now? And if that's significant enough, I'm going to vote against the motion. But I really thought it was a discussion worth having out of respect for Director Wilson. So maybe staff can answer the question without going to a referral and putting this off for 2 weeks.
Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been listening to the conversation, and I appreciate where Director Wilson's coming from in terms of his request. And I've been involved in this file since I've been here, and I know that the crux of the issue is the citizens' trust and confidence in the information and the monitoring. The staff's recommendations was Director Wilson was surprised by that recommendation, but it was informed by two principles. One is that the polluter pays, and so whenever someone is polluting the environment, it's the polluter that is supposed to pay for monitoring and remediation, and the Ministry of Environment is responsible for enforcing pollution. The CBRD has absolutely no ability to enforce pollution. Secondly, the consultant was very clear in saying that based on the amount of monitoring that's required now under the OMAR regulations, that he didn't feel that additional monitoring by the CBRD was required. So those are the two basic principles that informed the staff's recommendation. But I also understand Director Wilson's desire to have his citizens informed, and maybe if you refer this back to staff, we can talk about budget implications, but we can also investigate with the Ministry of Environment how they would be willing to come back and report back to the board on this very important topic, because they are required to monitor and to upload their data to a public website. And the ministry should be responsible for ensuring that data is monitored and taking appropriate action. And maybe we can satisfy the concerns of the community by having some form of a reporting system back to the board from the ministry, who are responsible for managing that site, so that there could be some level of confidence on the part of the public.
Supplementary, if I might. All due respect, Mr. Carruthers, you didn't answer my question. If we divert 10% of this drinking water and watershed protection fund into this specific thing, do we have a sense of what other work will not get done or what the impact will be on the overall program?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, that was what I was referring to, referring it back to staff. We can't answer that on the fly in a meeting, so we would come back to you with that information on in terms of what would be compromised if this was to go forward. That's what I was meaning by us addressing it. I don't think it would be fair for staff to deal with that in a meeting today without having to do some research.
Fair enough. Sorry, I missed that. I'm prepared to second the referral motion when it comes forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll have two directors that haven't spoken yet, so we'll just go to Directors Yanni DiNardo and Martman, and then we'll circle back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that staff have a comprehensive strategy that they've been working on. They are our professional staff. I will not be supporting this motion because it's already working to the way we need it. We need to look at it in a bigger picture. It's working well with what we have, and I won't support a referral either that staff look into. Again, giving staff when they need to get their work done. We keep doing that to them. I think that if there is one, I do agree with Mr. Crothers that maybe the province can come and speak to their responsibilities and what they should be doing, but we shouldn't be taking that on. And the staff is already doing a good job. So I will not be supporting this motion, that or the referral. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I see you, Director Coon, but I'll go to Director Martman first as he hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Chair. And, I'm hearing really good conversation here. I appreciate the questions. I really appreciate where Director Wilson's coming from. The idea of monitoring, having data is, so important to our decision making. And, I also speak for Area H and the Cassidy Aquifer and wanting more data there as well. I guess I hear what I'm coming to the conclusion on is that the stumbling block is not asking for the data, the stumbling block is money. And so the question would be, is there a way to accomplish this within the framework of what we have right now without putting money aside for this? Or am I not hearing it? Or maybe there is, and could staff speak to that?
Thank you. Any staff, Director, or Ms. Miller?
Thank you. I can speak to this year's current budget. This year's current budget was built based on a work plan, which the board approved. And so if we modify that work plan, there are either issues with regards to items not being accomplished or of having to increase the budget. So those are the opportunities. The next issue then becomes the 2022 work plan and the consideration of additional monitoring. And I guess what I would ask for clarity is if this is being referred back to staff to come back with a impact assessment, is the director interested in additional expenditures in monitoring those facilities and those wells, or is he looking at additional expenditures in monitoring the health of Aquifer 197? Those are two very different issues, and so clarity there would also be appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we still have the original motion on the floor. Sorry, Director Coon, but Director Stone has not spoken. Maybe I'll go to him first.
Thank you. I'm just curious if there is just a point of clarification. I believe the motion was 75,000 for a 2-year program, so it would essentially be half that per year. Is that correct? Okay, I saw Director Wilson nod. And the other part is that and this actually speaks to Ms. Miller's question, was I assume the intent of this was to continue the monitoring that has been done for 2 years to provide some kind of what the progress is, right? To continue to monitor it and see, is it continuing to get better, at what kind of pace and so forth. Is that from a sort of scientific point of view what would be recommended, or would it be better to bring those point in time samples closer together, or to spread them out? Because I think that providing some insight into the trends and the migration of different contaminants, or the dilution of those contaminants is definitely a constructive thing. But I'm just wondering, from a environmental services point of view, what kind of timing is best for those kinds of things? Because I could see seasonality being an impact, but also if we're looking more at the long-term health of the aquifer, would it be better to spread those out, do it annually, or is biannually or semi-annually better? Thank you.
Okay,
If I may, the two facilities are already monitoring quarterly. And so if we were to monitor, we would be duplicating that work as well as the annual summary report. So it really becomes a peer review of lab analytics with regards to perhaps reviewing the background aquifer water quality issues. As you know, the changes are very, very slow. And so my recommendation would be to undertake, to prioritize the characterizations of other critical aquifers in the area so that we get a base understanding of groundwater quality across the region, and then to actually work with the data to look at the tools and the regulatory frameworks or other mechanisms that we have in play, including things like education of homeowners about appropriate septic management, and then to go back and review the aquifer characterization and what we would call an attainment report. Have we changed a trajectory in a positive or a negative way on a decadal basis? Given the rate of change. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that you don't have information along that way. You'll know whether or not you've got private property owners maintaining their wells appropriately or maintaining their septic fields appropriately. We have tactical data on a very much more regular basis with regard to the maintenance of the sewage facilities. So those are two other ways to do it. The other piece is as we start to build out the information on groundwater quantity, and I'm making a separate piece here around groundwater quality and trying to get devices into more wells to, as Dr. Hitami pointed out, on a tactical approach. It also gives us information about groundwater quality because it's easy for us to do another test at the same time. So I would say, shoot for once every 10 years. And in this particular case, where we know that we have polluters that are required to monitor, we need to ensure that they continue to monitor, as well as reaching out to other polluters in the area to make sure that they fall within the guidelines required. I don't know if Dr. Hitami has another comment to make with regards to that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate. Because, just imagine in any watershed, because when we say watershed protection, you are protecting the watershed from whom? From the people. If we leave them at the natural state, nature is amazing, can recover itself, can protect itself. But the idea here is to understand, the capacity, and I qualify that for groundwater or surface water, the quantity and quality of the water sources that we have, and how, that water sources can maintain or sustain our activities. Because features in a watershed are man-made. You mentioned about the water main, sewer, but then do we have a better understanding of the health of that Aquifer 197? Or a snapshot of certain activities is man-made, Fisher Road, a treatment plant, etc., etc. It does not give me a kind of larger understanding or better understanding of the overall health of that aquifer. I don't have that. If we want to actually limit ourselves to that level, that's one thing, but that's the responsibility of the owner and the operators. And we put it in every license that we issue. As a matter of fact, potential pollutants could be a gas station, it could be a laundry mart, could be an auto mechanic shop, and any kind of factory, even farmlands. So that's one thing. You monitor whatever is done at that level, but then the larger level, the impact on our rivers, streams, and aquifer, which is really complex, because the water that you are drinking today may be a 45-year-old water, or even 90-year-old, or 100-year-old. So it takes a long time for a drop of water to get and refill, the aquifer. So we need to have, that understanding, and then we protect them. By whom? By what? By proper land use planning.
Okay, so thank you. So I'd like to get to the question. So thank you for your patience, Director Kuhn. Go ahead.
Push the wrong button. Yes, as I pointed out, I'm not in favor of the motion, the original motion, and I'm not in favor of the referral either. Here we are again trying to take on responsibility that is someone else's business. And we've recently had long discussions as to how can we change decision-making at the board, and that maybe we should have less referral motions. Maybe we should cut back on our demands on staff. And here again, we are making a mountain out of a molehill. And this discussion's been going on for an hour now, whatever, and we still didn't get anywhere. And please, people, consider what we're up to here. It is not our responsibility. It's the perpetrator's responsibility. They're supposed to do it. And our staff have committed a report, and as far as I'm concerned, the report is great. And for us to meddle in there now and pretend that we know better than staff, well, no wonder we have staff leaving the CVRD. Think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I'll go to Director Wilson to close, please.
Mountains out of molehills, eh? Tell that to 17,000 people who rely on that aquifer. That is the most degrading thing I have ever heard in my life, and he should be ashamed of himself for even saying so. And yeah, you can smile. You can smile.
Point of order.
Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we've been through that. Okay, I'm finished on that particular one. This is about money.
The chair has to weigh in on a point of order.
Yes.
Director Wilson, I think you heard the concerns. If you carry on, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is about money. I've heard this over and over again, and I'm not challenging the expertise of staff at all. What I'm trying to do is look after the 17,000 people, I'll say it again, who rely on clean water. And this bit about polluter pays, we were the ones that licensed that polluter in the first place. So it behooves, again, there's this strange word, it falls on our shoulders. This slopey shoulder is not my responsibility. Yeah, it was, because we did it in the first place. We put that polluter there. And it's up to us to make sure that we ensure that we look at, yeah, it's the province, but we were the source of that pollution in the first place by allowing that place to be there. And we need to make sure that we look after the things that we caused in the first place. Yes, this is probably going to fail. That's fine, but I won't give up fighting for this. I will not. And if I had the money in my pocket, I'd pay for those darn tests myself, because to be quite honest, I don't trust this polluter pays and this polluter monitors stuff. I don't.
Thank you, Director Wilson. So, Ms. Legault, could we hear I'd like to call the question. Could we hear once again is everyone okay with that? We've got the email. So that everyone's clear on the motion on the floor. So I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Okay, Director Morrison, did you have a referral motion or?
Well, at this point, it's moot. I wanted to entertain a referral motion before the question was called.
Okay. All right. I think we're now at 1 hour and time for a short break. Return at 11:48, please. Oh, Director Nicholson.
Can I ask a quick question before we move off this topic? In the report, they talked about Waterline encourages all private domestic groundwater users downgrading of the site to complete potability testing of their supply wells. What have we done to notify residents living down gradient of this site, of these sites, about the need to do that.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Nothing as a consequence of this particular report, but as a consequence of the Aquifer 197 analysis. All property owners who took part in it were provided with a detailed assessment of their water quality, and they were reminded that it is a good thing for all property owners to regularly test their water quality for a couple of key parameters on an annual basis, and then a fuller suite of parameters on a longer term basis, depending on what is going on. So they were reminded at that point in time. Our hope under the drinking water program, and again, it's around making sure that we line everything up properly, is that we will be doing public education about groundwater quality and about the importance of water quality testing. We'd like to do that as part of a targeted program in which we may be providing some incentives, but we have to do it under a particular program itself to do that. But we do remind folks on a fairly regular basis that they should get their wells tested, and they should also look at their wells to make sure that their wells are properly maintained, the casement around it is sealed, and that they aren't other elements in the well drawdown zone in terms of storage of things like fuels and those sorts of things in the well house.
Okay.
Just to follow up, I mean, I think it's really important in a general way to make sure that we've got programs to educate the public on managing their wells appropriately. But I think in this particular case, maybe a targeted effort with the few owners that are probably fairly close to the down gradient side might be appropriate.
Smelly?
The primary facility that's down gradient of this site is a facility that is up for rezoning. That is a health facility. And we have worked with them to ensure that we have a right-of-way should we want to utilize that site for future observation wells or additional groundwater monitoring. So they're very familiar with the issues. They're a partner with us in terms of the long-term strategy and the development of a structured observation well system as well. So they have been told, and we can certainly send the down gradient folks a link or a copy of the latest report.
Okay, thank you. So a short break. We'll see everyone at 11:50. Thank you. Okay.
Video's live.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And let's go to the next item on our agenda, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is Report R2 from the Economic Development Division on the Cowichan Connectivity Strategy Funding Opportunity. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that funding applications be submitted to Island Coastal Economic Trust's Economic Development Readiness Program and Northern Development Initiative Trust's Connecting British Columbia program to support the development of a Cowichan connectivity strategy.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Director Marsh, I see your hand up.
Yes, I had my hand up to move the motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Do we have, I see Mr. O'Riordan, or I did? There he is, yes. Do you have a presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, committee. I know this is just a report So I think it speaks for itself, but I welcome any questions if the committee has some.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Dr. Marsh?
Given that the report is very fulsome and we're asking for an addition to the money we've already delegated for this, I wonder if the committee would be willing to have the question called.
Seeing no further discussion, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. R3, report from Parks and Trails regarding the Cowichan Valley Trail, North Watts Road to Green Hill Road Trail completion and funding. And there is a lengthy recommendation ahead of you. I'm not sure if you'd like me to read it.
Yes, please.
That it be recommended to the board, one, that construction of the Cowichan Valley Trail roadside trail connection along Chemainus Road between North Watts Road and Green Hill Drive in Ladysmith include development of a designated parking area at North Watts Road funded by $300,000 approved for the project in Budget 280 Regional Parks and a $150,000 grant from the Trans-Canada Trail Foundation. Two, that a license of occupation with the BC Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for construction of a roadside pathway and roadway crossing facilities on Chemainus Road between North Watts Road and Green Hill Drive be approved. And three, that the 2021 budget for Function 280 Regional Parks be amended to one, increase grant funding general by $150,000 and two, increase capital expenditures lease improvements by $150,000.
Thank you. And I see that's moved and by Director Smith. No? Okay. Okay, so looks like a speakers list popped up here. First it was Director Yanni, DiNardo, Smith, and Morrison, and then Stone. Oh, and
I was just moving the recommendation.
okay, thank you. Second. All right, Director Duncan. Okay, now my speakers list was going to be Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question through to staff on this. I'm supportive of this, but you made note in the staff report that there were some challenges for where those $150,000 were originally earmarked. So I'm supportive of this going forward, but can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of where the what do you call it, Chemainus Rail and Trail South project is, and the second part is, will this complete the northern end of the trail within our jurisdiction, or what are the next parts? Thank you.
Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through Director Morrison. Second question first. Yes, this will complete the segment of the trail north all the way to the RDN boundary, other than continue to work with the town of Ladysmith in terms of further improvements through the town, because the trail currently uses the network of sidewalks and pathways within the town. And I know over the longer term, it's desirable to try and find a more direct corridor through the town itself. And to the first question, we are looking at still solidifying the route to connect the south end of the trail by the golf course in Chemainus with Highway 18 and Johnson Road in North Cowichan on the waterline route. So there's significant work to be done to further the design work and the approvals. And so timing wise, this doesn't provide us an opportunity to expend the dollars otherwise provided by the Trans-Canada Trail Foundation on that project within a timely manner. So we want to leverage the ability to spend the dollars while they're still available. And we'll continue to look to source funds to complete the gap over time.
Thank you.
Yes, I have Directors Smith, Nicholson, and Marsh.
Thank you. This is really exciting. And one of the things in the recommendation, it says to Green Hill Drive, Ladysmith. It's really the town of Ladysmith boundary, not Green Hill Drive. So I think that should we have a correction in the wording there, that it's to the town of Ladysmith boundary? Because if it only went to Green Hill Drive, there would be a gap.
Mr. Chair, the intention is to complete right to the existing roadside pathway within the town of Ladysmith. And I know that Green Hill Drive is just immediately south of that. So at the community's wishes, that amendment could be made, but the work will be done to connect all the way through, regardless of any amendment or not.
Director Smith?
Yes, I think this is great. You know, one of the things that I really think that we should be asking is Island Corridor Foundation if there's a possibility of graveling the trail, the train track trail, to move us along in a lot of connections that we could make. It would preserve the train corridor for the future and utilize at a reasonable cost these road, you know, the rail to trail is very expensive. And if there's a way of us utilizing that possibility, I have cycled on rail trails in other countries, and while they're waiting for decisions or to look to the future transportation use of a train area, a rail, they have graveled it, and it's really a great way to continue using an area. And the increase in tourism and the opportunity for active transportation. Did I lose my audio?
Okay, thank you. So
Anyhow, I think we should
almost 99%, I think.
Okay, I think we should look at Island moving along and asking Island Corridor to consider the graveling of some of our trail of the area.
Oh, looks like we're losing everyone.
Actually, Director Salmon, I believe it's your connection.
Yeah, I'm still good.
Okay. All right, I've lost all the video except for, can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
No. Yeah?
We have to say it out loud since you can't see our videos, people.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Wonder what to do here. It's coming back slowly.
We can see you and we can hear you, or at least I can see you, and I think we can all hear you.
Okay, well, we'll carry on and hope it recovers. I had directors Nicholson, Marsh, and Stone. Did I miss anyone? Okay, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am wondering if there's a difference between option A and B, whether there'll be additional work in the work plan as a result of option A or B, and if so, what other work in the work plan will fall off the table?
Mr. Chair, the extent of work would be additional with the parking area. However, we'd be looking at that work being done under the direction of engineer that will be contracted to oversee the work. So it would not be that much more to staff to deliver on, because we'd still be delivering on the overall trail project with just the addition of the parking. So it would be a little bit more work, but not significant, and we would not be seeing other things fall off the table if the committee and board gave direction to proceed as outlined in the report.
Thank you. Director Marsh?
Yeah, given that staff is recommending it and it's in the budget, I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Farquhar, it's in the 2021 budget. I think we should just call the question because we have several other items and we're supposed to end in 27 minutes. And it would be good to eat before we have to do the board meeting.
I hear you. Yeah, we'll go to Director Stone, who was the last one on my list.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually have a lot of questions about this. When we were told before that the crossing of North Watts and then across Chemainus Road was a challenge for MOTI to accept, but that seems, looking at the map here, what's proposed. And yet we were also told that we couldn't go further down the corridor and cross at the historic crossing between Green Hill and Glen Avenue because the corridor wasn't sufficient, yet the parking area seems to be proposed for that very section of corridor. So I'm just wondering why, for safety's sake, the trail wasn't continued along the corridor and the crossing placed at the pathway between Green Hill and Glen Avenue, reducing that need for a blind crossing coming up the hill and down the, both in north and south directions. When there's already significant discomfort for people to cross there, but yet that seems to be where the crossing is proposed of Chemainus Road. Yet when I walked the corridor last week through that area all the way until far past Glen Avenue, there seems to be sufficient side on both sides of the existing rail to continue the trail along the rail and then cross between Green Hill and Glen Avenue. So I'm just wondering why that wasn't proposed or put forward as an option.
Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that staff and our consultants have looked at that. The issues with respect to continuing within the rail corridor are possible, but it would forego the ability to accommodate parking in this area of the rail trail or the regional trail, because the corridor would otherwise be taken up by the separation requirements of the trail from the railway itself. We're typically having to be at least 12 feet away from the rail corridor. So that itself posed some challenges. I know that in review with the ministry, they are amenable to the crossing. They do not foresee or identify sightline issues crossing at North Watts Road. So certainly there will be further work with them, but early indications are they would not have an issue with a crossing in that location.
Okay, thank you. And just the only follow-up is that the number one complaint I get is that roadside pathway section between Ladysmith and North Watts Road. So it just seems, maybe a little bit misguided to be investing in continuing something that seems to be, at least from the municipality's perspective, the number one complaint is that the trail is deficient in that area, the roadside pathway being less comfortable for riders and users. I recognize that as you get further up the corridor, plus past Glen Avenue, that it narrows and becomes significantly more difficult to continue the trail. However, I just, being that the crossing at North Watts Road and then the roadside pathway between North Watts Road and Ladysmith seems to be the number one complaint that we get about this area of trail, that it seems just unfortunate that we would be investing in some permanence there rather than looking at the alternative solution. But I accept the answer about the parking area. It's just unfortunate.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no further hands, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? 3 opposed. Okay, motion carries. Next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R4, report from Environmental Services Division on a 2021 budget amendment. The proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that the 2021 budget for Function 530, Couch and Flood Management, be amended to 1, increase provincial conditional grants revenue by $24,535, increase federal conditional grant revenue by $24,535, and increase project expenditures by $49,070. 2, that the 2021 budget for Function 131 Environmental Initiatives be amended to increase partner contributions revenue by $100,000, increase partnership project expenses by $100,000. And 3, that the 2021 budget for Function 131 Environmental Initiatives be amended to increase provincial conditional grant revenue by $236,500, increase federal conditional grant revenue by $236,500, and increase partnership project expenses by $473,000.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item, Ms. Legault.
Mr. Chair, item R5 is a report from Legislative Services on 2021 UBCM resolutions, and this report is for direction.
Okay, Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is coming forward to Regional Services for consideration of any potential resolutions to UBCM. Just for the committee's awareness, we took this to the senior management team and canvassed the group as well as the all managers this year to determine if there was any outstanding issues that the management team felt would be worthy of taking to UBCM. Neither the SMT or the all managers identified any pressing issues, and we're also cognizant of the brevity of UBCM this year being a virtual environment and wanting to limit the number of resolutions. I just received correspondence today from the minister, our Minister of Municipal Affairs, regarding minister meetings. And so if there are topics that the committee is interested in that is an alternative to a UBCM resolution, would be to book minister meetings. And I identified two items that you've discussed today in your meeting. One around the land bank issue with the Minister of Agriculture that Director McGonigal raised. And then also, I think it would be worthy of having a discussion with the Minister of Environment around the Fisher Road issue and reporting of those test results. So you've got two items there and you don't need to decide that today. I'm going to bring a further report back on minister meetings, but just some context for you.
Okay, thank you, Director Markman, and then Smith.
Yeah, I think I also heard along Land Bank was the issue of second residences on agricultural land.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith?
I'm not sure if this fits in under this. When there was the fire on Lewis Street, one of the things that I had concerns about is that the low income renters don't have insurance. And we talk about affordable housing, we talk about providing for lower income. And when they have emergencies, they need to have insurance for their contents and things like that. And I'm not sure if UBCM is an area where we can make a recommendation that while the province is looking at affordable housing or low income or homelessness, that they also look at some form of insurance for contents or emergency for these areas so that there is something there for them to fall back on. And maybe there's some recommendation that we could put forward for that.
Okay, thank you. So I also have Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we just, as a point of information for folks, and I should probably be reporting to the board, but we just had the advocacy week last week with UBCM and provincial ministers and MLAs, and they are listening, and I think they're listening to local government. I would suggest, as Mr. Carruthers has stated, that we be somewhat targeted in the resolutions that we might be interested in putting forward, because the virtual format has proven to be somewhat challenging to do in a live fashion. And I was just at the Lower Mainland Local Government Association convention that was held over 3 afternoons, and participation wasn't what they wanted, and the resolution session wasn't easy. So we should try to be targeted. And I'll put my plug in now for those of you that are attending the AVICC convention on Friday. 3 p.m. today is your deadline to vote for executive and resolutions. And if you are registered, you should have received the information to direct you to that process. So I would just suggest that, again, that we be fairly targeted and fairly specific on a resolution or two if we're going to send any in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before I go to Director Nicholson, just so the procedure then, I see in the staff report, so these would have to be finalized by our June 23rd board meeting. So suggestions go to who on staff? Mr. Carruthers? To you or?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I prefer that the suggestions got vetted at the committee level, you know, but potentially. But yes, if you want to, if directors want to give ideas, I guess, to legislative services, we can bring them forward in a package. There's a fair bit of research that needs to go into a UBCM resolution. So the sooner the better, that if the board endorses staff to be looking into those matters, that we have ample time to do that. UBCM obviously requires background information as well as the resolution itself. So there's a fair bit of work involved. So the sooner the better.
Okay. Director Nicholson and then Stone.
Thank you. I was just remembering our conversation about the RDN's growth management strategy and the fact that the consultation with neighboring jurisdictions was not what we would have hoped for. And I think Director Sebring suggested we bring that forward as some sort of a recommended motion. So maybe we need to think about that.
Okay, thank you. Director Stone.
Thank you, Director Nicholson, for bringing that one up because I think it's very relevant and timely. The other one was just an observation that as late as we were getting set up for AVICC, there was a couple that were in my mind that were actually addressed at the AVICC resolution. So give everybody encouragement to see if you don't get to vote in time, make sure you go through the package, and that might check a few off the list that we thought we might bring to UBCM because they're already in the AVICC package.
Okay, good reminder. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much. Given the virtual format of not only AVICC, but UBCM again this year and the complexity of the resolutions, would our focus not be better to be pointed to the ministers in charge of the services or amendments that we wish to bring forward? For instance, the land bank, as was stated earlier, and perhaps the amendments to the Local Government Act be pointed to the appropriate minister on the RDN strategic plan, etc. I think the focus with the ministers is more appropriate than the resolutions, given the virtual format, and that's just one avenue that we could approach it this year.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Is that your hand, Director Marsh?
I also support what Mr. Carruthers suggested and Director McGonigal just spoke in favor of. So that's all I need to say.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that was, well, that was, I was going to say for interest, actually for direction. So you happy with the direction, Mr. Carruthers?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think I'll be adding the letter from the minister regarding ministers' meetings to an upcoming agenda. So we'll have another opportunity to have that conversation and finalize our minister meeting requests.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next items, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would take us to question period.
All right, and we have our 10-minute break to allow for question period. So return at 12:27, please. Yeah.
The video is live.
Okay, thank you. So welcome back. Any questions from the public, Ms. Legault?
We have Mr. Evans with us this morning.
Oh, welcome, Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I really appreciated the report, water report on the nitrates on Aquifer 197. I thought it was very good, but Director Wilson was asking for something else. He was asking to have all the water tested, both surface and aquifers. And having reports put in on that. In your experience, Mr. Chair, you've been around here a long time. Have you found that you could trust the provincial government to report polluters and to look after your water? Or did you find that the public had to go out and prod the provincial government along to protect our water?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Interesting question. So I know we have had a lot of back and forth on this. And I just maybe just say that you know, Director Wilson's done an awful lot of work on this, but in general, I think that any public involvement is a good thing, and asking questions of all levels of government helps with focusing awareness and just getting some of the answers. Doesn't always work, but I think that's the public involvement is a key element in looking after our water.
Mr. Chair, what do you think the response has been from the provincial government on rectifying reported pollution with the water? Do you think they have come right out and looked after things in a timely fashion, or do you think that it takes them forever because they are undermanned?
Well, maybe I'll just say this. I think we can all always do better, and that includes the provincial government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any further questions, Ms. Legault?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. So our next item is motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion carries. So we'll see everyone at 1:30.